What if the thing you keep running from is the only thing that has the power to heal you? Loneliness. You've called it your curse, your burden, your shadow. But what if it's not here to hurt you? In this video, we are stepping into a sacred space, one that doesn't try to fix you, change you, or rush you into happiness. We're going to walk hand in hand with something you've been trying to escape for so long: the silence, the quiet moments that echo too loudly, the stillness that makes you ache, the nights when it feels like no one sees you, and you start to wonder if maybe you don't even see yourself anymore. But buried in all that emptiness is something astonishing, something ancient, something powerful. It's the part of you that was never broken. It's been waiting behind the noise, the people, the performing. It's the part of you Carl Jung once said could only emerge through the deepest descent into the soul, where there are no masks, no distractions, and no applause. Only you, raw, unfiltered, alive. If you've ever felt like you give everything and still feel invisible, if you've ever smiled while dying a little inside, if you've ever sat in a room full of people and still felt like you didn't exist, then this isn't just a video, it's a mirror. I invite you to stay, to feel, to listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. And if you feel held by these words, gently like this video, if your soul whispers, "Finally, someone gets it," subscribe to the channel. There's more where this came from, and you're not meant to walk this road alone. Let's begin. You were not born lonely. You were born whole. Eyes wide open to the world, heart unguarded. You cried freely, loved instantly, trusted fully. But then, something happened. Slowly, quietly, so subtly that you didn't notice at first. Someone looked away when you needed to be seen. Someone didn't hear you when you screamed in silence. Someone only loved the parts of you that were convenient, quiet, or pleasing. And over time, you learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that to be accepted, you had to leave parts of yourself behind. You didn't call it loneliness then. You just called it life. You filled the spaces with noise, laughter that didn't reach your eyes, conversations that skimmed the surface, people who didn't stay, promises that always felt just out of reach. You became so good at pretending, they called you strong. So good at smiling, they never asked how you were doing. And in the quiet moments, when the world paused and the masks came off, that old ache returned, not loud, but persistent, a throb, a hollow. And still you called it weakness, flaw, failure. But it wasn't. It was the soul knocking gently on the door, reminding you, you're not home yet. Loneliness isn't just the absence of people, it's the absence of self. It's walking so far from your own truth, your own essence, that you begin to forget the sound of your own voice. You may be surrounded by people and still feel like you're fading, because it's not them you're missing, it's you. It's the way you used to sing without shame. It's the way you used to cry without apology. It's the way you used to dream before someone told you your dreams were too much, too big, too impractical. It's the way you used to laugh that real laugh before you learned to measure it, to filter it, to shrink it down. And in the silence, that version of you still exists. But silence is terrifying, isn't it? Because in silence, there's nothing to distract you from the truth. The truth that maybe you've outgrown the life you built. The truth that maybe the relationships around you are echo chambers, not homes. The truth that maybe, just maybe, the person you've become is a beautiful imposter, stitched together from other people's expectations and none of your own. You run from the silence because you're afraid of what you'll find. But what if I told you that silence is not the enemy? What if I told you silence is a return, a portal, a remembering? Carl Jung wrote of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury because they're too painful, too raw, too inconvenient. But he also said this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Maybe that's why you keep finding yourself in the same patterns. Loving people who can't love you back. giving when it leaves you empty, apologizing for your needs before you even speak them, because you haven't gone into the silence yet. Not fully, not with courage, not with the kind of reverence that says, show me what I need to see, even if it breaks me. Because the break is the beginning. You think you're lonely, but maybe you're just being invited back to yourself. There is a moment, a quiet, unbearable moment, when you realize the life you've built is too small for your soul. It comes not in chaos, but in stillness, a soft betrayal, a subtle shift, like trying to breathe in a room with no air. You walk through your days as if everything is fine, but something inside you whispers, this isn't it. And maybe that whisper is why you're here, listening. You've been praised for how much you endure, how much you give, how well you carry everyone else's weight. But has anyone ever asked what it's costing you? There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being around people who don't really see you. You can smile, nod, play the part, and still feel like you're disappearing. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, like fog in the Sunday, bit by bit, you stop sharing, stop hoping, stop asking, and the worst part, no one notices, because you've trained them not to. They say you're independent, but it's not independence. It's survival. You've learned to need less, so you're not disappointed. You've learned to silence your truth to avoid conflict. You've learned to fill the silence so you don't have to feel the ache underneath it. But inside you, there's still a child, waiting. A child who remembers how it felt to be overlooked. A child who reached out and was met with coldness or distraction or nothing at all. A child who began to believe that being unseen was safer than being rejected. And so you adapted. You became what they needed. You made yourself small enough to be loved, quiet enough to be tolerated, useful enough to be kept. But you forgot one thing, that you were never meant to stay small. Loneliness isn't just pain. It's also a signal, a flare from the depths of your being that says you're living outside your truth. And silence is the space where truth begins to speak. But truth doesn't yell. It whispers. It waits. It's patient like the stars, always there, even when hidden by the noise of the day. When you sit in silence, real silence, the truth comes. Not all at once, and not always gently. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like rage. Sometimes it feels like relief, but always it feels like coming home. And yes, it's hard because no one teaches us how to be alone with ourselves. No one tells us that healing isn't always pretty. No one warns us that before we feel peace, we might feel everything we've been running from. But you are not here to run anymore. You are here to reclaim, to remember what it feels like to belong to yourself, to walk into the silence, not as punishment, but as initiation, to say, I will not abandon myself again, not for anyone, not even for love. Because if love costs you your voice, it's not love. If belonging costs you your truth, it's not home. And if peace only exists when you perform, then it's not peace, it's prison. So take this moment. Let it be sacred. Let yourself feel the loneliness not as a verdict, but as a teacher. Let the silence show you who you were before the world told you who to be. There's a stillness that comes after the breakdown, not the collapse itself, but what follows. When there's nothing left to pretend, nothing left to perform. When the masks have slipped and the stories you told yourself no longer work. It's quiet there, unsettling, and yet honest. You sit on the floor of your life, surrounded by the fragments of all you thought would save you the people you loved too hard, the dreams you chased to feel worthy, the compromises that left you empty. And for the first time, you stop reaching outward. You stop asking life to give you back what it never promised to begin with. It's here, in this quiet ruin, that something sacred begins to stir. Not hope, not yet, not joy. That comes later. But truth. A soft, unshakable truth, the kind you can't unknow once it's spoken inside your chest. You realize you've been searching for someone to rescue you from your loneliness, when in truth, what you needed was someone to sit in it with you. To say, you don't have to fill the silence. I'm not leaving just because you're sad. I see you even here. But no one came, did they? And so you sat alone, convinced that your darkness was too much. Convinced that your depth made you unlovable, that your needs were burdens, that your longing was embarrassing. But what if the real tragedy isn't that no one stayed? What if the tragedy is that you believed it meant you weren't worth staying for? You became the one who stayed for everyone else. The one who listened, who held space, who softened herself just to be more palatable. And in doing so, you disappeared. But now, here you are, hearing words you were never told, sitting in a silence that doesn't shame you, remembering a truth that never stopped being true even when you forgot it. You were always enough, even in your neediness, even in your ache, even when your voice trembled, even when all you had was tears. You didn't need to be stronger or quieter or less. You just needed someone to say, I'm here. I'm not afraid of your depth. But when they didn't, you learned to be that person for yourself. And that's the quiet strength no one claps for. The courage to hold your own hand when no one else will. The softness to still believe in love, even after betrayal. The patience to sit in the ache without rushing to numb it. Because you understand now, loneliness isn't the absence of love. It's the call to return to the love you've abandoned the love within yourself. And silence isn't the void. It's the voice you've been avoiding. Carl Jung once hinted that the most terrifying thing is to accept ourselves completely. Not just the bright parts, the resilient parts, the admirable parts, but the rawness, the rage, the unhealed grief, the tenderness that still flinches. To sit with all of it and say, you belong here, all of you, even now. So if the world has grown too loud, let it. If the people around you don't understand, release them. If the loneliness lingers, welcome it. Because maybe you're not falling apart. Maybe you're falling back together piece by sacred piece. There's a moment when you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start whispering, what happened to me? Not to blame, not to stay stuck, but to see, to finally name what was never named, to witness what your younger self endured without anyone noticing. You didn't just grow up, you survived. You learned to read faces like maps, searching for the safest expression. You measured your worth by the tone in someone's voice, the delay in a reply, the weight of a sigh. You made yourself easy to love by being easy to carry even when you were breaking inside. So it makes sense, doesn't it? That silence felt dangerous. That loneliness felt like punishment. Because when no one showed up for the child you once were, being alone didn't feel neutral. It felt like abandonment. Even now, in the quiet, your nervous system remembers. It flinches. It waits. It fears. Not because you're weak, but because you once had to choose between being real and being safe, and you chose safety. Of course you did. But now, safety looks different. It no longer means shrinking. It no longer means silence. It no longer means staying in places that bruise your spirit just to feel a trace of connection. You've walked through too many deserts to keep begging for drops of love. And here's the truth you've been circling for years, maybe even decades. Loneliness isn't a punishment. It's a passage. It's the soul calling you back, not to isolation, but to integration. To no longer split yourself in half just to be tolerated. To no longer edit your truth to make someone else comfortable. To no longer fear the sound of your own voice in an empty room. The silence is where the remembering begins. Where you look into the mirror not to judge, but to meet yourself. To really see your eyes, not for how tired they are, not for how much they've witnessed, but for how much fire still lives in them, how much softness, how much unspent wonder. You haven't lost yourself. You've just been hidden, beneath expectations, beneath pain, beneath years of putting everyone else first. But you're still in there, And now, in this quiet space, with no one to impress, no one to please you, get to choose. Will you keep abandoning yourself to avoid being alone? Or will you finally choose yourself, even if it means walking alone for a while? Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not polished, whole. It's messy, it's slow, it's lonely, but it's also holy. Because piece by piece, you gather what you left behind, the laugh you muted, the rage you swallowed, the dreams you dismissed, the softness you buried, and you begin to stitch them back into your being, not with force, but with love. And as you do, the loneliness changes. It no longer feels like exile. It begins to feel like presence. Your own, the most loyal kind. The kind that won't leave when you cry, or ache, or fall short. The kind that doesn't need applause, or answers, or perfection. Just truth. Just breath. Just you. There's a quiet moment when you realize you're not afraid of being alone anymore. Because now, the silence doesn't feel like absence, it feels like space. Space to breathe. Space to listen. Space to be. You've spent so long tying your worth to the way others see you. If they stayed, you must have been lovable. If they left, it must have been your fault. But what if their leaving had nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with their own inability to hold something as sacred as your truth? You are not hard to love. You are hard to manipulate. You are not too much. You're just finally refusing to make yourself less. You're not dramatic. You're just done hiding your pain under politeness. And that shift, that sacred, terrifying shift, it changes everything. Because now, your boundaries are not walls, they're invitations. They say, if you want to be in my life, come with truth, come with presence, come with care. Because I've already known the ache of being surrounded, yet unseen. And I will not pay that price again. Not for attention. Not for approval. Not even for the illusion of love. You see, real love, the kind your soul aches for, doesn't shrink you. It holds you in your fullness. It doesn't demand performance. It invites authenticity. It doesn't flinch when the shadows rise. It says, I'll meet you there, even in the dark. But before anyone else can love you like that, you have to go first. You have to meet yourself in the mirror and say, I see you. On the days you're soft, on the days you're storm, on the days you're tender, quiet, raging, brilliant, wrecked. I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. That's where the real healing begins. Not when someone else says you're enough, but when you stop asking them to decide. Loneliness brought you here, but it's not where the story ends. Because now, that ache inside your chest, it isn't emptiness. It's room. Room for your truth. Room for your voice. Room for a life that doesn't require you to abandon yourself to be loved. Carl Jung once said, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. And you are waking up from the spell of performance. Waking up from the belief that silence is punishment. Waking up from the fear that you're unworthy without someone else's gaze. You are not lonely because you are broken. You are lonely because you are finally meeting yourself fully, deeply, truly. And that meeting is sacred. Let it change you. It's strange, isn't it? The moment you stop trying to escape yourself, everything begins to soften. The silence that once screamed, now sighs. The loneliness that once clawed now cradles. And in that stillness, something ancient rises from beneath the rubble of all your pretending. It doesn't wear armor. It doesn't shout. It's not a version of you you've shown the world. It's the real you, the original one, the one that was never wounded, only hidden, the you that didn't shrink to be loved, the you that didn't confuse love with sacrifice, the you that didn't perform strength to survive. And when you meet them, really meet them, something in your chest cracks open. Not in pain, in recognition. Because all this time, you weren't trying to be happy. You were trying to come home. Home to your body, home to your needs, home to your truth. And loneliness was just the invitation. It had to get quiet for you to hear the call. It had to get still for you to notice what you were running from. Because sometimes, before we can find peace, we have to sit in the places where we once betrayed ourselves. And you've done that. You're doing it now. Every breath you take in this moment is a rebellion against the lie that you are not enough. Every tear you've shed in silence was a baptism. Every boundary you've drawn, even while trembling, was a declaration. I am worth staying for, even if I'm the only one who stays. This is what healing sounds like. Not always joyful, not always loud, but honest. Raw, real. The kind of truth that doesn't need to be dressed up or explained. And yes, it's still lonely sometimes. But it's a different kind of lonely now, isn't it? Not the aching void of abandonment, but the spacious quiet of becoming. You start to notice things, the sound of your own breath, the way your body feels when you're not rushing, the tiny voice inside you that says, I'm still here. And suddenly, you realize you are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. And every lonely night, every silent hour, every tear on your pillow was not wasted. It was sacred because it was in those moments when no one else saw you that you began to see. You began to see that your sensitivity is not a flaw, it's your compass. Your grief is not your weakness, it's your wisdom. Your silence is not emptiness, it's your sanctuary. Carl Jung believed that your vision will only become clear when you look into your own heart. That's where you are now. Not lost, not forgotten, but finally returned. So now, here you are. You made it through the silence. Not because it ended, but because you stopped fearing it. You stopped asking it to be anything other than what it was. You let it speak. And in return, it gave you something more precious than comfort. It gave you clarity. You look back at the version of you who once begged for scraps of love, and your heart breaks, but this time with compassion, not shame, not regret, just tenderness for the one who didn't know better, who tried her best, who thought love meant losing herself. She was never weak. She was never foolish. She was just lonely and human and hungry to be seen. And now you see her. You see all the parts of you that once hid the girl who dreamed too big, the one who cried too easily, the one who was too intense, too quiet, too wild. And you gather them close, because this is what wholeness looks like. Not perfection, not enlightenment, acceptance. The parts of you that were too much for others are exactly the parts that are guiding you home. You begin to realize you were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be understood by yourself, and maybe by a few rare souls who have also walked through their own deserts, who know how to sit in silence without needing to fill it. And when you meet someone like that, someone who doesn't flinch at your honesty, who doesn't run from your depth, you'll know they aren't afraid of silence because they've made peace with their own. But even before they arrive, you are enough. Even if they never do, you are whole. Because the relationship you build with yourself in the quiet, the way you speak gently to your own pain, the way you hold yourself on the days when no one checks in, that is the foundation for every love that will ever follow. Loneliness showed you that, not because it was easy, not because it was beautiful, but because it was honest. And the truth, when you stop running from it, always becomes a sanctuary. So now, as the silence settles again, softer this time, kinder you breathe, not to escape, not to distract, but to stay. You stay with yourself. You stay in the moment. You stay because you've finally remembered how. You are not lonely anymore. Not because someone else showed up, but because you did. And that changes everything.